Good day and welcome to the 100th episode of the Strong Ambition podcast. And because it's a 100th episode, I wanted to have a special guest on, the man that has inspired me for ambition, desire, and passion more than anyone else I know, Don Qually, my father. My dad is a grain farmer of many years, which you'll find out. And this is really a story of resiliency and passion because of how much he loves what he does. Farming isn't easy. Not everyone can make it. Not everyone wants to do it. But you'll certainly find out how he was really made for this. In this discussion, we go over how he grew up on the farm, what it was like being a young man, and how difficult some of the jobs were, how he actually initially started in farming, how that evolved, how different farming was back in the day compared to now, what it's like dealing with really tough years on the farm, and how his constant determination is what pulled him through. We also talk about the future of farming and how it might evolve. But most importantly, you're going to find out just how much this man loves to farm. And I want to dive right into this interview because my dad's a man of few words, but much of wisdom. And it doesn't matter what job or career you have. I think you'll learn something from him, just appreciating his passion, his focus, and desire for what he does. So without further ado, here is Don Qually.
Cheers, Pops.
Cheers.
Cheers to your 59th crop?
49th.
49th. Sorry, 49th. You're hitting on the 50.
50
right?
next year.
50 next year. Okay. That's awesome. Well, let's start chatting there. Because 50 is a long fucking time. So you would have been, because you're going to turn 67, so you would have been 17 when you started. Let's just, I actually want to even before that a little bit.
17 when I first started earning an income off the farm.
Your first original crop yourself, your own crop, which is huge. So that's young to start in a trade. I really want to know genuinely what it was like growing up, because that would have been 1960, 1970 on the farm. Like, what was it like growing up on the farm when you were younger? Here's a good question. How young were you when you started having to work on the farm? Do you remember how young you were?
I remember being 11 years old and driving a combine for the whole season, one of the combines.
Holy shit. Okay, so 11 years old. What grade is that? That's like grade, I don't even know what grades that was. It's got to be grade 5.
Grade 6, I don't know.
6, yeah. Well, how old were you when you got me to do it? I was in high school, wasn't it? Weren't we like grade 8, 9?
Yeah, something like that. Well,
grain cart, not combine. That's for sure.
Well, I remember you had to drive the combine from one end of the field to the other when you were about 4.
No, I was in grade 3 or 4.
Oh, okay.
I was in 4, but I remember that was like the biggest deal ever. It was just like 100 meters, but it was like I was on King of the World there. That's great. So you're operating when you were 10 or 11. Did they have? But like. You even got me to work early, but like what kind of like even chores, like on the farm, your responsibility to work was just higher, expected from you right away. Would you say even like before you were in the combine, was it constant chores, constant work on the farm?
Oh, I always worked on the farm, always in the yard doing stuff, cutting grass.
Like how young?
Painting granaries. Well, by the time I was 11, 12 years old, that's what I was doing.
Yeah, you were working part-time on the farm, basically.
Yeah.
It always blew me away when I was in high school. I remember talking to some people, and I was like, what'd you do this year for summer? Just hung out. Just kind of hung around. And I'm like, oh, man, people don't have jobs in the summer like we do, right? And bear in mind, I'm not saying I was a great worker. I fucked around a lot on the farm. But you had expectations of us, like a Monday to Friday, like we had to do the shelter bed, whatever. And God knows that your work would have been harder. Do you remember like how hard some of the jobs were back then? Was it a lot harder back then? Because I mean, that's something I'm going to talk to you about, is just the evolution of farming. But how about this? What's some of the shittiest jobs you remember when you were growing up?
Oh, there's lots of shitty jobs on the farm, so I don't know where to start there.
Start with like, especially back in the day, like when you were younger. Like the thing I really like to pull out of the story, I understand from you, is how hard in like a positive sense because you had to persevere through doing hard work on the farm. What were some of the hard jobs that taught you really good work ethic when you were younger?
I don't know, Rylan. Like like I say, there's a lot of crappy jobs in the farm, and you know that because you grew up in the farm too. But they all have to be done, and so you just, when you were asked to do them, you just did them, whether you liked it or not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, so that attitude, I'm curious about that. That's a great response to whether you liked it or not.
You couldn't just walk away from it. You had to do it.
Yeah, but like I mean that response is amazing. Where you can't walk away from responsibility, and I'm saying that when I look at this day and age with there's a lot of entitlement in even my generations coming. I feel like, especially listening to when you and mom were talking about what it was like in school, like kids weren't afforded entitlement the same, right? Like,
no, there was no entitlement, I would say.
You didn't have, there was no privilege to there. Like parents didn't allow it. Would you say Grandpa was very strict with you?
No, I wouldn't say that. He appreciated the way I worked, and he always, he always had a comment on the way I did work, and I always did a good job.
Right. Okay. So would you say, because you made it sound, and I'm not saying it was Grandpa, I'm just curious, like the culture, like, and you have this about you. You've always had this sense of like, the work has to be done. Like you don't have a lazy bone in your body, essentially. And would you say that there was a culture growing up with, maybe Uncle Barry just on the farm, like around you, that like there's no time for laziness, essentially? You didn't see that around you?
No. Like I say, you were given a job and you went out and you did it, whether you liked it or not. And you might have complained. I mean, everybody complains about what they have to do, but you always did it and got it done.
Yeah. And I think that's beautiful. Like growing up with that instinct, I'll even say I didn't have it. I want to say on the board, I want to say borderline. I was bratty at times, for sure. I was entitled at times, for sure. But even then, I was at least grateful after. I'm like, thank God you guys got me to work. Because if I had that attitude just like in me when I had work, when I had job, when I had all that stuff, what if I didn't? What if I didn't have parents that put something on me when I was younger? It's like, there's almost like, I want to call it, it's its own battle if people don't have to go through perseverance. Because later on in life, when you have to go through perseverance, you're not strong. And so I was grateful that, after, at the time I wasn't, but after, I'm like, thank God I was, because I didn't have that instinct, right? So you're growing up on the farm, 11, 12 years old, embracing the hard work, which is amazing. You play any sports growing up?
Some, not a whole lot. I like playing baseball, but there's always this time thing. It was always the wrong time of the year, so on and so forth. Hockey a little bit, not a whole bunch again. Growing up, I had a motorcycle and stuff, and when the day was done or whatever, you rode your motorcycle around and had some fun. I mean, it wasn't all just work.
Yeah, so what I notice, especially now, your recreation is snowmobiling. That's like one of your favorite things. Snowmobiling, as we just watched NASCAR, are your two like passions. I still remember the one time we were like,
it's gotta have a motor.
If it has them, oh man. Okay, so this is perfect for what you just said. We're taking you out for golf on Father's Day. And I mean, golf's a gamble for any golfer if you're going to enjoy your day. And it's like, it's me, Kaylin, Shreese, and Chris, and you. And you can hear that there's like a race car track. And there's I can hear that. Oh man, that sounds nice. And you're having a miserable day on the golf course. And you're just like, I want to be there. I want to be there. And he actually spoke to me. I'm like, man, he loves cars. Like that's your thing that speaks to you, like training does for me. So I think that's really interesting because, like, so you grow up And that was a big part of why I didn't really think it was a good idea for me to take over the farm, because I had no I was not mechanically inclined, right? When you're going up on the farm.
That's probably my fault.
Well, I think I'll always say it's a joint effort. We did not communicate well when I should have been interested in the farm. We really butted heads a lot, right? And so when you were growing up, though, you're getting passionate in more mechanics, right? Is that fair to say that you were really interested in more of the mechanic side too?
Well, I was kind of forced to, and you have to build to fix things, and so you just something you have to learn.
To have you learn, you learn it on the go. But I always think of this. Kevin McKay, rest in peace. He said one of the funniest ones to me. The one day where this thing kind of broke on me when we were working at the Zamboni at the Iceplex, and it wasn't Zamboni, but it was something that helped clean the ice, and it like bent, and he like hammered it together, and he's like, "Okay, farmer fix, it works. Go ahead." He just grabbed a hammer, bent it back into shape. It's farmer fix. I'm like,
Keep going.
That just dawned on me. Like that's what Dad always does. He just does the best he can, and then if it needs specialization, you bring someone in for it. But you're gonna do a lot of shit.
All to get through the day.
Get through the day, right? That just makes sense. Okay, so as you're growing up in your teens, how different was the farming back then? Like, how different was it? I remember talking to Uncle Walter, and he was plowing fields. So
you know what, Roland? Things really change over 49 years. Like, I always thought about the changes that my dad went through.
Yeah.
And I guess I've seen them too. I just don't realize it.
Right.
But it's more the computer age now, and that's what's really changed a lot in farming.
When you were farming, was it still closed cabs when you started young? Because I remember seeing that there were still some open cabs on the combines.
I did both. I had, I started running a TD9 there when I was probably 11 years old or whatever. We used to grow clover and plow it down. And so that was part of what I had to do, is plow the clover down in July when it was really hot out, and then disc it and keep summer fallow like that. That was years ago when we used to summer fallow. We haven't done that for many years. But yeah, that was just one of the things that I did back when I was younger. And I mean, the evolution of farming, everything's just changed. I mean, all farming practices have changed. There's no more summer fallow. It's a continuous cropping. It's just, everything just changes.
So what's a summer fallow, and what do you mean by continuous cropping?
Summer fallow is when you take land out of production and you would just work the land and to get weed control and so on and so forth. Well, because we've got chemicals now to control the weeds, and that started years ago. And you do the reason why you plow down clover is for a fertility program that put nitrogen back in the ground. That was what we did back then. And you might have had a 30-year farm in summer fallow, and then the rest was in crop. And every year you do like a third and a third and a third. And
interesting. Yeah. Well, and that's a part of farming. I think you underestimate your skill set, or just like appreciate how intelligent it is, the chemistry that goes into it. I remember when I finally took in bio, and we were learning about plant biology, and it was like, oh, that's why Dad always puts nitro into the ground. It's like really important for the soil. It's something I'm going to talk to you about later, is like the evolution of farming.
And I call it the soil, I don't know, husbandry, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
Taking care of the land, because it's got to take care of you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I don't think people appreciate, is how much science goes into it, that farmers are very aware of how to take care of their land, because they have to, because they need it, right? And I think people underestimate that. What was it like doing, just so people understand, like a combine like this, like it's a tractor without a cab, ton of dust, hot summer day, like, is that like?
Well, like I say, the first year that I run a combine there for the whole fall,
yeah,
and the combine had a cab, but it didn't have any air conditioning in it. So whenever you threw the door open, because you didn't want to sit in the dust, and you had a fan, to cool you down, and that was it. And it would get stinking hot in there.
Yeah.
And I remember we used to grow, we were growing barley, a lot of barley back then, because Dad and Uncle Barry had a hog operation together, and they'd grow barley and peas together, and the peas were for the protein for the feed. And I was very allergic to barley dust. It used to irritate me something terrible, and I had to suffer. I suffered a lot in the cab of that combine from the barley dust, itching and
yeah. No, yeah, the dust is so shitty. It feels like
that's one thing I really remember from.
Yeah, for sure. When you get the dust, especially in your skin, it can be like fiberglass. Like it just doesn't stop itching even after.
Well, you know what? As the years go on, you seem to get a little bit tougher to it, a little bit more immune to it.
I actually noticed when I didn't farm as often and it came back to the dust, it started to get, oh man. Or I just never noticed like how stuffy I might have been actually, like kind of not terrible. Like people who are allergic are fucking allergic. Like it's just like when you're constantly getting dust in your nose, you're not used to it. Naturally, it can run you down. But no, I mean that's kind of the shit I'm talking about, where it's just like really hard, shitty jobs that you have to deal with on the farm when you're growing up. What was it like? When did you feel like you were making the decision that you would likely want to take over? Like you likely want to continue as a farmer? Do you felt like you had a choice? You feel like it was just kind of like
you always had a choice. I would say Dad kind of tried to discourage me, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And how old was I then? I was still, well, like I say, when I started farming, I was 17 years old, so I was still in high school. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I rented some land together with my two brothers, and I had the opportunity to do it. And that's where it all kind of started for me. And I just wanted to keep doing it. I love the farm.
That's awesome. So like that thing, like you love to farm, like, just that way that you said that is really key to me, because you, for sure now you feel that. So when you were 17, you would say, I love to farm. Like, would you already say that you felt that sense of being on the farm, enjoying the process of the hard work, but seeing the development of what comes out of it? Like you were already feeling the love for the game. You're already feeling it a bit, right?
Around when I was younger, and I'm going to go back before I started farming, I had off-farm jobs before that, like a couple of them, and always just wanted to come back home.
Really? What was your off-farm jobs?
Well, one of them, I remember years ago, Gordon Livingston, a neighbor not too far from here, he used to grow sugar beets, and he needed guys to come in and hoe sugar beets, and so I'd strap a hoe to the side of my motorcycle, and we'd go 4 or 5 miles down the road and go out there and hoe sugar beets for the day. And so that was just one of them. And back then I was probably 13 years old or something, that was kind of when there was a bit of a quiet things around here. And other than that, when I was on the farm here, there was always something to do. It was always yard work to do. There was always buildings to paint. There was like one year I felt like I walked around with a paintbrush for most of the summer painting buildings.
Yeah.
But it was where I wanted to be, and got paid $1 an hour. And if I worked 10 hours, I got $10. That's the way it was.
Yeah. No, and it's crazy. Like the inflation of like pay, how low pay was, but all relative costs. Then you talk to like grandparents, it's like 10 cents, 25 cents.
So you talk about one of the other off-farm jobs when I got a little bit older. I think when I was around 16 or so, I went up to Paint Lake in Thompson with a friend of mine, and we worked up there for it was a provincial park. I think I was up there for a month. It was just kind of get off the farm and go see what else is out there. And And I remember we were getting $3.75 an hour in board and room, and thought we were on top of the world. And when I got back home, I couldn't wait to get back home and start working on the farm again. I just missed it so much.
That's so cool, though, right? Like, to miss a job, right? You got to appreciate that, to miss something like that.
And, Ron, like through my whole career here, I've always had off-farm jobs, done something, whether it was a fuel truck driver, a school bus driver, working at Valmar in the wintertime, manufacturing, learning stuff. But when spring came around, man, you couldn't wait to get back home.
That makes it your game, right? I think that's beautiful. Like that's such a calling. It's a powerful calling to say that you're having that. I can't wait to do this thing. That's a huge blessing, right? Like, do you know
Well, as much as some of the things that turn you off about farming, when you left them and you came back, you always appreciated the farm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
And there's a lot of jobs in the farm that I absolutely enjoy. Like, I love going out and seeding a crop. I love watching it come up. I
still remember that conversation I had with you and Johannes. That was like one that really spoke to me for you. Because you and Johannes were trying to convince me to farm. Do you remember this night?
No, I don't.
You and Johannes, I went over to pick you up. I think I came from Justin Johnson's house across the road, and you needed a ride home. And then you guys were still having a whiskey, and then you're talking to me about farming and the beauty of farming. But what was really cool was the contrast between you and Johannes. You guys we'll take you for a crop tour. We'll take you for a crop tour after seeding. And you're going to see it right after, just when it comes up. And you kept talking about the pride of growth, which I thought was really powerful. And Johannes talked about the beauty of growth. So you were in this, like, I made that, like I created that. And
no, I didn't. I did my part, and I just like to watch it come up.
Well, but like there is still, you said the words, I made that. You did say it. And Johannes said, but the dew, the way the droplets are. And I'm like, okay. Beauty, landscaper, the aesthetics, that's what's his calling. You, creation, you create a farm, you create the seed, you have a crop, you grow a crop. So like those moments of just recognition for your job and appreciation for your job in the simple, slightest way.
It's not all dollars and cents.
No, it can't be. It can't be. And the big thing to me, like I look at this is like, there's something to be grateful for having that appreciation with your job, because of most people hate their job or do not get that. They do not get that from their job. They're going to get a paycheck Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Hopefully they're not miserable, right? But especially on a world scale, especially don't even need to go world scale because it's definitely not that good. But even on like a Western scale, like a lot of people don't get that kind of pride and excitement where it's like, I can't wait to go back to work. Like that's a huge thing, right? And I mean, that's why you've been always one of my greatest inspirations is the passion that you do for this. And because watching you go through the shit and seeing how intense you are a lot of the time, you would know you enjoy it so much.
It's called stress.
Yes. Yeah. By the way, I'll give you another story. I'll compliment that. I feel like I've told you this story, but I got to give you that break because, you can be an intense person when you're angry, just like anyone. But, me and Kaylin always were your stress or were around you in the stress. So we're both, right? I was Dr. Destructo. I fucking ran into this building with a box up, right? Like, I know I was.
Well, Kevin and I were just talking about it today. It's the best thing that ever happened to this building.
I was the best disaster that happened in your life, I think. The amount of accidents that ended up panning out. So I still remember this because I was trying to keep up. It was just me and you working on the farm. And I think you were at Mark's. And you were done yours. What was funny is like you were actually chill because you were done yours. You were just doing Mark's. So you weren't in a rush. But I felt like I was in a rush because it was just me and you, and I was like having a hard time getting into that small auger over there because that small auger had like the hopper bins, getting the auger in those small hopper bins, it's like a fucking millimeter, like inches. And the one time I shot it in perfect, so I thought it was gonna be easy. I was at it for like 15, 20 minutes. I thought you were waiting. Mom comes out to be like, ask me something about supper, and I just answered her, tell Dad Dad, I'm just having a hard time lining this up. And then she says, what? And I yelled, tell Dad I'm just having a hard time. And I yelled at her. I'm like, why did I just yell at my mom? She did nothing wrong. And I'm like, this is all of my dad's anger. He's yelling at the situation, but I just have to be the conduit, or mom is the conduit. Poor mom takes most of that. And yeah, I just totally understood it, that like when you are trying to push to get things done, and there is so many things that can go wrong on the farm, right? It's hard not to, wear stress on your sleeve, especially when you care about it, right? But no, so I mean, I think that's a valuable thing. What? Tell me if I'm wrong or right, but this was a legend from Mom, so hearing through the grapevine. My understanding was that you had possibly a choice of whether or not you wanted to be a mechanic or a farmer, but Uncle Barry kind of said, no, try to just be a farmer. If you're going to be a farmer, don't do both. Is that fair, or was there ever kind of discussions around that? Because you like mechanics too, right? So
mechanics, there was a time when I came out of high school and stuff, and I was going to, maybe try and go into diesel mechanics and stuff, but that was only as a personal kind of a backup to the farm, and because you knew it was something you were going to have to use on the farm one day.
Yeah.
The mechanical end of it. I worked in a garage there out of high school and stuff, and during high school, and anyways, like I say, that was an off-farm job. That was just to learn stuff. Did I want to do that for the rest of my life? No, I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. That was just going to be a backup.
I see. Or an extra skill backup kind of thing. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I didn't, no. And I mean, like, it does make sense. It was like when we hired Norm here, and because he's a heavy-duty mechanic, right?
Yeah.
I always said the best free agent signing we ever had. You pick up a heavy-duty mechanic.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So let's kind of talk about the evolution a little bit here. You start at 17, right? You get into it. It's like, I fucking like doing this. What can you tell me about that? Let's start with, the experience for your first couple of years of farming, fully be on your own. What was it like? Goods or bads?
The first year was really good. We had a decent crop and everything. And so, like I say, this land that we rented was a 1-year deal. And then Dad rented me a quarter section because he seen that I wanted to keep farming. So he rented me a quarter section, and that year it wasn't very good. We had a really wet fall. It was growing Glenley wheat. It all sprouted, and it was a good thing. Dad and Uncle Barry they had a hog barn and stuff because we were having a hard time to market grain back then. You had the wheat board going on at that time, so everything was really regulated. If you had poor quality grain, it was really tough to sell it. And the only reason why we were able to market some of that grain is because of the fact that we were buying feed from this company, and they would take the grain. They would buy our grain because we were buying feed from them and stuff. And so I was fortunate that way, that I was able to kind of come in under their program. And over 49 years, I've had good crops and I've had bad crops. And somebody said one time, well, how come you only remember the bad years? And I said, well, that's the ones that hurt you. So that's why you remember them. But I do remember a lot of good years too. But you don't talk about them that much, but you hope for more. And
yeah, I think that's actually a good survival instinct. Well,
it's always a farmer farms for next year, always.
Yeah.
We'll do it next year.
That's really good. Yeah. Farmer farms for next year. You should live for next year. And when you think about just survival instincts as a human, like just an animal existing, what do the good times tell you? Not much survival wise, But like, if you're literally an animal in the Sahara, you're going to remember the fucking lion. You're going to remember the bear. You're going to remember the things that almost killed you. And so the years that grind you, in some way, you should wear those as a badge of honor. You don't invite them, but hey, I fucking got through that. Like, and that's so important to remember, right? It's like, yeah, remember the good times, but they didn't teach you a ton. And so that only makes sense that you're going to remember the bad times, because it's a guarding mechanism for preparing for the next bad time. Mm-hmm. What do you have to have in place for the next bad time? Do you, like, the things that you have to do with grain, and whether or not you're going to save it or not save it, the insurance and stuff like that, right? I didn't realize, so Grandpa had hogs? At one point you guys had livestock?
Dad used to have, one point, he had lots of livestock. He used to have cows here and stuff, and chickens and everything. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Do you remember your quote as to why you didn't want to keep animals?
You know what, Rowan? When I went to university, I was always one of the things I did in my final presentation was to have hogs. I wanted to have a farrowing barn, because Uncle Barry had a finishing barn, and I thought I could supply him with the hogs. Oh, yeah. And I never did get into it, but I'm glad I didn't now, because the farrowing end is a lot of work. It's a lot more management, and it would take you away from the grain end of it. And the grain end of it is the one that I like. I like growing things and so on and so forth. But that's.
Yeah, so I had asked you, I think I was younger when I asked you, it was like, Dad, why don't we have livestock? Why didn't we have any animals? Do you remember what you told me? Rylan, I can fix a combine, I can't fix a cow.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that just makes sense. Like, it's already a gamble to be a farmer. And you mentioned you already like the grain more. You know how to fix the engines better than anything. You can't be a fucking vet. Like, that just adds more headaches to you when it's already a gamble. And like, I only know, I mean, the Rasmussens even got rid of their beef, or their cattle. Was that cattle for beef, or what was that for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beef cattle. And then the Ansus, they do dairy, and it's like, fuck that lifestyle. Like, I remember talking, like, by all means, they're happy with it, and I support that. But you have to be born and raised into that,
and just be okay with sleeping 4 hours. Like, on average,
yeah.
They don't get sleep. And I was like, you guys actually never get sleep? No, 4 hours. I'm just like, okay. That just bothered me from like a health standpoint. And bear in mind, like, I mean, again, people live a happy life, whatever they can. And it's so much work. They're profitable, right? Milk's not going out of business anytime soon right now, right? But at the same time, like, so much work. And like, you know, even like grain farming, what you're doing is already really hard. And then you hear about these other farmers, like hearing about the vegetable farming, like Mayer, like Jens Mayer was one of my clients for a while. And he was like, oh yeah, 10 weeks of harvest on your feet, cutting up the crops. I'm like, man, really? And then it's just incredible that people persevere through that. And
well, they got to have a love for it too, just like anything else.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's the family. I think the family supports it. You know, the big thing to it. It's a culture. So
it's not just a living, Rylan. It's a way of life.
Way of life, absolutely. That's very true. That's very true. It's literally the way to live your life. There's culture. There's it's beyond. It's always this funny thing about.
You know, we've always said that farming's not a good living, but it's a good life.
But there's something really important for people to appreciate the word life being not separate from work. But they always talk about work-life balance. And it was actually one of my mentors that I'd asked him about work-life balance. He's like, isn't it all life? And it was a quote that fucking changed the way I look at things. Because it is your life. It's like, if you want to spend so much at work or so much at home, you want to spend, like, that's your life. There's no work-life balance. It's completely how much you want to do things. And you just said it's a life. It's a lifestyle. It's literally the way I'm living. I'm existing to do this thing. I'm not calling it work. Yeah, there's work to do, but I'm not calling this time clock punching in a card for someone else. This is my purpose. That's life. I think that's beautiful. I think that's an amazing thing. Now, what I was curious about was we mentioned like the hard years. So I want to know about the hard years because you said when we talked last week and you're like, I don't know, they're just hard. Describe a hard year to us, like to me, like what, like that I don't even know about. Describe to me what a hard year was like, what made it hard, some really tough moments for it.
To me, there's two types of hard years. There's a dry year and there's a wet year. And the dry year, there's nothing you can do about it. You just take what's there at the end of the year, even though you've put in the same amount of money and the same effort and everything else. But the reward, there's no reward there. If you can get by, and that's when you say next year. There's next year. And as long as you can survive that year to get into next year.
And do you have, would you have?
Let me finish.
Oh, please do.
And so now, then there's the wet year.
Yeah.
The wet year is hard on you mentally.
And physically.
And physically, because you're struggling to try and get that crop off. And the crop is deteriorating, and you know you're losing lots of money. But you just keep battling. It's like a battle. And
because there is some good crop there, right? Because there's some good spots. There's some fucking.
Well, you have to get what you can get.
Right. When you had dry years, like, has there always been crop insurance since you've been farming?
Yeah, but I mean, crop insurance doesn't cover near what your expenses are.
Right. Oh, really? It doesn't even cover expenses.
Oh no.
Oh wow. Really?
No.
So how many years have you had it where it was like, did you ever have negative years, like in the red on a year, or was it like lucky to break even years, or how?
Oh no, it's been negative years.
You've had negative years, yeah. So crop insurance, does it just cover the cost of the crop? Like how?
Yeah, let's put it this way: it doesn't pay any bills.
Okay, so
you just hope that you can stay in business, and that's when you, like I say, you make sure that you're out there on an off-farm job to put bread and butter on the table. And
right, that's where you take some extra work on the side, working at other places, and do what you can. And I mean, luckily, banks are there for extending loans and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, you look at that and you try to do as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure. Control what you can. No, I mean, that's always the thing. One of the things, I'm not going to lie, that hit me when I was younger about whether or not to be a farmer was honestly just a discussion Kayla had with someone. We were young. We might have been playing. I'm just combining memories, and I might be making this part up. I swear we were playing the board game, the farming game. And like, this is a rough memory. I could be making this up. But it's like, don't you guys want to grow up and be farmers? And Kayla just said, well, 60% of your result is like dependent on the weather. So I'm not sure if I want to do that. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like a bad gamble. And then on top of that, I also didn't know how much profit there could be on the farm on the other end of the spectrum. So you could have nothing.
Feast or famine.
Yes. And the feast is way higher than I thought it was. Like how much, crop can really make.
You got to make sure that you hang on to some so that you can make it through all the tough years.
Well, I mean, I think that's what people, or I didn't even realize, was like, you're not just taking in the crop, then you got to play with the market, right? So you're playing with the markets at that point. It's like, do I sell to this guy or do I hold out? Because the profit could go up. If I sell right now, it could go up. I could make another $2 to $3 grand. But if I try to wait that out, it could crash. And it's like, oh man, so you got a whole other level of stress to manage markets. Another thing you can't control, right? The level of lacking of control. That's what I didn't like about it, but I think you have that in any career, especially ironically, I ended up being an entrepreneur. I didn't know I was going to end up being this kind of an entrepreneur, like in social media, right? I didn't know, online training. I had planned on being a carpenter. Did you know that? Do you remember that's what I wanted to do? And so I thought it was kind of more set to be like, I'd just make money doing that, and, but huge gamble in most entrepreneurs, right? You're always playing with the market and market demand. But so thinking about those tough years, the one that comes to mind to me, because I was a part of one wet year we had. I'm trying to remember how old I was. I must have been in high school. Do you remember a year where I was like grain carting? It's probably one of our last really wet years we had. Do you remember that year? I can't remember what year it was though. Probably don't remember the year specifically.
I can't either.
But I just remember it was so bad because none of the trucks could come in the field. It was not an option. You might have even pulled out race tires on the combine for the first time that year. I almost got stuck in a sinkhole with the grain cart. But like, you know, the grain cart is one of the MVPs that year, right? Because you're shipping from the combine to the truck constantly.
Trucks parked on a road in good ground.
Parked on the road. You know, and like you mentioned, that's the fight. Is like we're just hoping we can get this crop off in enough time that it's still a good crop, right?
Well, and I mean, you're carving up the land.
Messing up, that's true, yeah.
And, you know, it usually gets late into the fall. And, you know, I always say fall is the time to make a seed bed. And you might not have a chance to make a seed bed because there's been years where I haven't had a chance to make a seed bed. And so it's kind of a hangover from one year into the next. Mm-hmm. Like can start a disaster there and the disaster carries in to the next year.
Yeah, miserable, but pushing through. And so this might be actually a hard question to answer because I know you're going to have a simple answer. What pushes you? Or rather this, do you ever feel an ounce of, fuck, like I want to quit or I just wanted to give up? Like has that ever hit you? And if so, what pushed you through it?
Only at the end of each day.
Only at the end of the day. That's your quit. Okay, I'm quitting today. And then I sleep like 5 or 6 hours and do it again. Is that genuinely how you feel, or what would you say? Would you like? And I'm curious because like every career is different, like, and every person is different. Some people feel like,
you know, my dad always had a saying. He'd say, "Cheer up, things could be worse," and sure enough, they got worse. But in that negative note, I have to say, you take each day in stride, and one day leads into the next, and hopefully the next one's better than the day before. When things are going really bad, like
it's funny because like, and you're right, like so it's really cool to hear you say this because you're talking so optimistically. But you don't perform as an optimist most days, right? Like, but this is, I think I mentioned it before, it's the safeguard, right? You've had shitty years and the what looks like a cynic, like, you know, believing in the
half glass, half full, half empty. You have to, you know, I know lots of times you're looking at the half full glass, but I always try to start out looking at the beginning of the day, the glass is not half empty, but half full.
I think you talk like it's half empty all the time, but you always act like it's half full. Is that fair to say? Like you talk to me and mom and and Kaylin, and like you talk like a cynic, but you perform and you believe. Like everything you're saying right now, man, that's everything's optimistic. It's the next day. I only quit at the end of the day. Like that is all optimism talk. And that is what makes you so good at your job, because you can't be good at a job like this unless you're optimistic about what else you can do, right? And just, do you appreciate what, and is it fair to say that you speak more skeptically?
I do.
But you perform optimistically.
That's a quality thing, right?
And I was going to say the same thing because you said it about Uncle Barry at his birthday. You said, you know, he's not the biggest optimism that I know. And I was like, okay, so this runs in the family. This is a farmer thing. I guess it's just normal to be skeptical on life, right? But again, I think this is what people probably don't even understand about farming is it's just like, especially when how shitty it can get. Like, you almost just make jokes about it being shitty, although it looks like you're wearing it. You're not wearing it on the inside as much as people might think you are. You're going to go and get it done anyways.
Well, you got to stop it from letting it overcome you, like letting it, because you won't last.
You wouldn't. There's no way you keep going. And I think that's probably even what maybe, you know, mom or myself would almost concern. It's like, why you talk so negative? And it's like, hey, but I'm going to still show up. Like that negativity doesn't fucking stop me. I'm okay with the negativity. And everyone operates different like that. Like I don't talk super negative on things. I might prepare myself for negative thoughts and stuff like that, but I don't like verbalizing them. I don't like bringing attention to them. And I'm more like Mom like that, but that doesn't mean, you know, I'm not going to quit. Like everyone manages it.
But don't bottle it up.
No, I don't bottle it up. It's not, I wouldn't call it bottling it up. I would say I don't draw attention to it. And I think everyone manages it differently, right? I think people just manage their, like what Mom does very well is she does an amazing job of being calm when shit's crazy. Would you agree with that? Like when we've had very dramatic moments in our life.
Well, because she always says I'm 0 to 100.
Fair enough. And like having to manage that, you have to be calm. But I mean, like when we've had serious life events, you know, Sharice and Chris get in a car accident, I get in a car accident, like Mom's calm. Like she is not, you're like a little bit stressed, you're panicked, and Mom's just, we're going to do this. We're going to deal with this. And that's where she shines. Like that's where it's just like, my goodness. I remember when I hit the pole down the road here and I was just like, do you think this is right? And she's just like, yeah, come on in. Oh yeah, no, it's a write-off. I was like, it's almost like you just expected me to write it off, and you're not mad at me, you're not yelling at me, and just to be able to keep calm like that. So I think everyone handles stress different like that, but I think it's just cool to hear your real belief and the way that you're driven in these scenarios. Quitting just wasn't a question. It wasn't even an option, right? It wasn't like, it's just like, yeah, shit's shitty. Sometimes you go for the next, you know, I'll tell you a really cool thing that I use for myself routinely. I remember telling you this, but when I first got into like being just a trainer in the gym, and I took as many shifts as I could everywhere between TTF, trying to run my own business, and then doing focused fitness as many hours as I could take. And I was running long ass days, barely any sleep. I remember you told me at some point, I can't remember if it was teenager or early adulthood, I remember you said, make hay with the sun shines, Rylan. We got to go. And I took that so to heart. I remember at the time, yeah, you just have to go when you go. And then I knew that this was my make hay moments, right? I have an opportunity to work. I was new in my industry. I have to fucking grind. I have to. And it's not that I plan on living like that, but I needed to do everything I could. And
so you're not a farmer, but you're using his mottos.
I had to.
Make hay when the sun shines.
I literally made a little chant for myself at the end of the day when I was fucking tired. I was so dead.
Good for you.
I kept saying, make hay while the sun shines. Make hay while the sun shines. And it was just a little chant I did when I would just finish my day and be like, I'm supposed to do this. That's what my dad's done for years. And it works, right? Like to appreciate that you got to go through grind, right? And not everyone, and all you can go back to like part of that whole life doesn't have to be work, right? Life is a lifestyle. I'm very lucky that I have that same appreciation for showing up to work the next day. The people I work with, the people I help, the way that you get to go look at the farm, the way that you get to go out to the field, that excitement you get is the excitement I get when I go to deliver what I deliver. And so it's like, yeah, the hours suck, but it's a sweet way to spend your time when the hours are tough. It's like, it's not like the existence sucks that much, right? Unless you're cleaning bins. I'll tell you, that's probably one of the...
Now you think about the things that you enjoy in that job, what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so rewarding in the process. It doesn't feel like work. I did want to mention this. This was probably one of my favorite ones. I'm not saying it was the worst experience, because at that point I was mature enough to do hard work, but one of the smelliest jobs I ever had. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know which one it would be.
To spray out the rotten soybeans
out of the bin.
I couldn't breathe. Like there was like not oxygen in there, plus putting all the humidity with the sprayer in there. Yeah.
So Rylan, just imagine that, and having livestock, like having hogs, because that's what you're living in, and that's what you're smelling, because that's what it was like.
And I was just gonna say, like, I wanted you to humble me with a story, because I know no matter what I've been through, you've been through worse. This is just a generational issue. It always gets easier for the next generation. Mm-hmm. That's also why I want to know your story, because, you know, when I have kids, I know they're going to have an easier life, but I don't want them to lose that integrity, right? because I even look back at who I was when I was a teenager, early adulthood, but for sure teenager. I was way more privileged and, just like, what's the term I'm looking for? Just like privilege, entitlement is the new generation problem, right? And I think you guys weren't even that hard on me. I really don't think you were. I did at the time, right? I did at the time. I was completely unaware of how hard life should be and could be. And like you just mentioned, like, oh, that was a hard job. So yeah, actually I did that a lot with hog bins and all that stuff, and at a younger age and doing it a lot. So, I mean, that's kind of what comes with it. So hard years, good years. And now I'm curious about this. So we're looking at one more harvest, right? You excited for this last year?
Yes and no.
Bittersweet.
Yeah, I'm going to miss it.
That's what I figured. Yeah. Because, like, I mean, just this conversation enhanced it more. I totally actually think like it doubled how much I knew you loved farming. I just talking to you now, I appreciate how much more you love it, because that is just so much your identity. It's just what you've done for so long.
And you got it. It's your identity.
Yeah. It's your lifestyle. It's your life. Are you thinking about keeping a little bit of crop around, or what's your idea?
Yeah, I want to kind of fade out of it. I don't want to just walk out and slam the door. Like, it's going to be hard, Ron.
I'm curious of this. Let's talk about big picture as farmers, because you've seen so much over the evolution. Have you seen the automated farming that's coming out?
Oh yeah.
So what do you think of that? Like the idea that farms, like, I'm not sure if you're in the conversation or you've seen the conversations around it, that essentially, let's say it's 20 years from now, like there's probably a high percentage farms that are going to come out.
It's not 20 years. It's closer than that.
10?
Yeah.
Do you think
maybe less?
Do you think like Brandon Garrett? Do you think like around here we're going to start seeing like people just like automate their seeding, automate their
I don't know, Rylan. You know what? Like, I mean, to me, you still have to be there to do a lot of these tasks. You can't depend on.
You have to like supervise it, but like, it's crazy.
Yeah, but I'm not talking supervising from behind a computer screen. You have to be in there watching what's going on. Like, I don't know, you can have as many control devices on a piece of equipment as you want, but to me, you still have to be there. You have to be there. You have to feel it. You have to look at it. You have to know what's going on.
Because things can still go wrong.
Yeah.
Well, and so that's where I would even like propose the 20-year mark, because in the next 10 years, more people will, like, even right now, you're still in the cockpit, but it's like in the whether you're seeding or you're harvesting or whatever, you still have to make sure it's not going wrong. You still have to turn it around, right? But the reason why I said 20 years is because everything's exponential, but there is a huge learning curve for these things, meaning the errors are still being made, right? There's still things where it like gets sets off of the GPS. GPS is going to get enhanced. The autocorrection is going to get enhanced. I genuinely believe that AI is going to take over, not the whole farm, just the operation of it. In terms of, I always go back.
I can't hardly relate to that. I can't see it. I can't,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you can jump on a vehicle today and you can drive down the road and you push a button in your steering wheel and it'll steer the car and so on and so forth. I just have a lot of faith in it. I don't.
That's right there. And that's why I said 20. I want to go back to this because it's going to take 20 years for us to trust it. Because, like, think about this. Do you remember where cell phones were 20 years ago? Fuck, I don't. Like, they were like little flip phones, right? Now I run my business off my phone, right? It's a computer. 20 years from now, they already have, once you have something in technology and there's the acceleration of its capability of learning, like it's accelerating exponentially. It doesn't go up linearly, it goes up exponentially. And the acceptance of it is going to be the 20-year thing to me.
But to me, there's so many things on the farm when you're farming, like when you're seeding and stuff. You have to make sure it's going in at the right depth. You have to make sure everything is working right. It's just
The feel.
the feel.
The feel matters. That's fair. That's fair. And I think like that's so something I look at for my job as a personal trainer and as a nutrition coach. The feel for the person, right? Like, you can write up
That machine, when you're running it, like a lot of times when I'm in there, I don't have a radio on or nothing. I'm listening to the machine. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah. Well, especially at night, you're like,
and like you could buy these combines now, and they've got all the automation in them that you can you push a button, and it's load sensitive. Yeah. If the crop gets thinner, it'll speed up. And everything in the combine speeds up or slows down or closes up or opens up or whatever it has to do. But anybody I've talked to that has that and has tried it, they don't trust it. And I think it's got a long ways to go.
Yeah,
there's something about the personal, the being there and doing it, and listening to it that I don't think a computer can do.
Do you think it'll ever do?
I don't know.
And so,
like you say, AI's got a long ways to go, and
that's where I'm really
and to trust it.
To trust it. Well, I mean, we can have the same conversation with automated cars, right? I personally, this is actually my belief with cars, because I get in accidents more often than most people, but also everyone doesn't understand that a lot of people are even worse than me, and there are a lot of bad drivers out there. And the reason why I'm excited for AI to take over driving is because people are unaware of the probability of like how unsafe driving already is. And listen to Elon Musk talk about like trying to make AI cars better. He says we're not just trying to make it better than a bit better, substantially better than drivers, right? They're trying to make them way better so they really don't make mistakes. But when it comes to, like you mentioned, the thing with a crop, again, this is where I just, in some sense, be optimistic, because I think it can be good that AI can learn a lot. That touch, like, what does that mean? More sensors, really, but to teach it what it means.
But what about when those sensors screw up?
What about when your sensors screw up? So you are no different. Your software too. So, I mean, you could say the same thing to a person. And I'm not saying that sensors don't screw up. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, what about the sensors screw up? Absolutely. They could. But so can humans. Humans can be half asleep at a wheel, right? It's like sensors can screw up. And the thing that I find that we fault AI for, we don't fault ourselves for, in some sense. You know what I mean? Like, and it's the same thing with, like, self-driving cars. It's like, well, they're going to make a mistake. It's like, people do that all the fucking time. Like literally today on the way over here, guy cut me off. But he cut me off coming from behind me, acted like he didn't see me. I'm like, I don't understand that behavior. He made an error, right? The thing that I feel that I agree with on the engine front and on the whole, especially when it comes to combining, I know it's very field-based. I don't know about seeding like you would know about seeding, but the combine is very field-based, because there's a process of how it takes it in. Taking in that crop, there's so many moving parts. You see it, you feel it, and you've seen so many crops. Is it fair to say that combining would be more sensitive of an operation than maybe seeding or spraying or something like that?
Oh, I think they're all important, Brown. I think they're all very sensitive.
Okay. So seeding, do you see the same thing where there's a sensitivity touch that you need to it that maybe an AI wouldn't pick up?
When I come up to that low spot in the field and it's wet, how is it going to know that you should go around it? How is it going to know that?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm just theorizing here. Okay, so it's an AI. They're trying to program it for the field. The sensor, in some way, if it's going to sensor like visually, it would have to be able to recognize the things that are going on, possibly visually and even like texture-wise in the field. That's a good question, because it would need a sensor, it would need some sort of a way to know that that's wet in that field as it's coming up to it ahead of time. Maybe the information that computers are able to read what's coming up in the soil.
Same thing with a combine. You're out there combining and you might, there's a green spot over there.
That's really
the combine's coming, it's just going to go right through that.
I think I would just theorize that the AI's ability to recognize, they would have to program it to recognize what it's seeing visually and to, like, okay, when soil is like this, you can see those dark spots, not only just for the elevation flow and everything like that, that part is going to be wet, that part is going to be green, we don't touch that part. And you would program that. I mean, you programmed yourself, right? So what could you program in a computer? It's just conjecture, like it's just a theory. Most things go to AI, are going to AI. So I'm curious, and this would be also my question for you. Do you think it's good for a farmer?
The what?
Do you think it's good for farming that AI could help?
In some areas, but I'm not in all. Not it might eliminate a hired man, right?
That's the key. Like it could be eliminating. This is a lot of people's fear around AI. What's it eliminating? And there's arguments on both sides. And I start to see more of the downside of people losing jobs. One of the arguments of, hey, if
what are you going to yell at when you got you're on the combine there and there's nobody on the grain cart and the grain cart's not doing what he's supposed to do and he's not at the right end of the field? Who are you going to yell at?
Who are you going to yell at? The grain cart's already there. I can't yell at you. You're already doing your job. Goddamn robots here all the time. I can't yell at this guy. Whose fault is it today? Yeah. No, I mean, that's even like a valuable thing to think about is, like, I mean, I learned my trade from doing the sub-trade, right? Like you learn from being on a farm by doing the sub-trade on the farm. You start the grain cart operator, you start here. And a lot of trades are like that. You work your way up. One of the interesting arguments that people have for pro-AI is, hey, when AI solves problems, there's more problems to solve in society. Like you just find new problems, new work. But then I heard the opposite end of the argument. Some people don't want to actually chase that pursuit. They just want simple, hard work. That's the interesting thing. It's like some labor people just like to show up. They prefer to just show up, put in their time, and that's it. So I do think that's a complicated thing where it does lose a gap of society. But I'd just be really curious to see where it goes in some sense. Now, when farms like yourself, for example, you don't keep going, is it true that more big farms end up taking over a lot of it? Like now I know you have people that you would sell some of your farm to, but I've heard that sometimes like it seems like more corporations, more big farms are trying to take up a lot of it.
That's the way it is right now.
It is evolving that. And because there's no more extra land on the earth, so it's like land is one of those valuable assets for a farm.
Yeah, and the thing is, Ron, like the whole thing is it's so expensive, and like everything's $1 million. The combine's $1 million. The sprayer's $1 million. The tractor's $1 million, and so there's $3 million, and you need these tools to work with, and so now you need more land to justify the ownership of this stuff and to pay for it
And to compete. Right?
And to compete.
Because it's even competition is so fucking big because everyone else got the big one, right? Oh, he's got that big one, and so everyone's producing so much grain, so much crop, and so you got to compete with it, right? It's just like what the expectation is in the game. No, that makes sense. I was curious to this. This is more on, we talked about it earlier, and I just wanted to bring it back because I think some people, when they talk about farming and grains, they talk about monocrop agriculture in a very negative way, and I wanted clarity for myself. Now, when you do crop rotation, correct? Like you do a specific crop on place, and then you will rotate it depending on what the next crop is, because it could benefit each crop differently. And it could be bad to do the same crop on the same piece of land. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's a disease thing. You have to rotate it.
Okay, so my understanding is then that some places in the States don't do that, and they ruin the topsoil in the process of doing monocrop agriculture because they know that they're producing things like corn that are like subsidized and they can produce a high amount. And because high fructose corn syrup is a huge, refined, it's just huge for food production.
Yeah, and they've got government programs there, and that's what kind of dictates all that.
So is that fair to say that that's like shit farming? Like we shouldn't be doing that farming?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like it shouldn't be.
Because that would be ruining the topsoil, that's actually ruining the crops, and that's basically just poor agriculture.
Well, it's rotation on everything. It's rotation on the crops for disease. It's rotation on chemicals, so on and so forth. It's just,
Yeah, interesting. Because I remember someone had said this, or this has been going around in the internets about, there's apparently only like 20 crop rotations left, or 20 crops left in our topsoil or something like that. And I started to really peel this back, and even talking to you, I was talking to Rory about no, we take care of our topsoil. And I was like, okay, so what is this coming from? And it's the monocrop agriculture, but that 20 crops, we have so many crops left, that's like just, it's just not nonsense. It's not a real thing. However, there is a problem going on with monocrop agriculture that could be really fucking up a lot of the good fertile ground because they're not doing the good things.
Yeah, it's well, I'm going to get back to this again about the it's not just crop rotation itself, but it's the rotation of your chemicals and stuff that you're using, so that the weeds don't become resistant to it. And so it all goes hand in hand. You have to have a rotation of chemical. You have to have a rotation for the crops. And it's all about, I'm going to call it land husbandry.
Yeah.
Like taking care of the land.
Taking care of it. Yeah, you said that earlier. Land husbandry. It's your soil. You need it. That's the most important thing. That's the foundation of everything. It's the soil. And we got some of the best soil, right? Like in Manitoba, it's some of the nice clay.
It's good. It can grow good crops. It's get the right weather, and you can grow good crops.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, this was a fun chat. We've covered a lot of topics, and I was honored to have you for my 100th podcast. So maybe I'll convince you in another 100.
Your 100th broadcast and almost my 50th crop.
Almost the 50th. There we go, right before the 50th. And maybe I'll have you on for the 200th episode if you're up for it. All right. Cheers, Pops.
Cheers.
Thanks again to Don Qually for that interview. It was an honor to be able to interview my dad and to find out more about him. And it was really kind of interesting how hesitant my dad was to do this interview. Now, he's not a public speaker. I am a public speaker. My siblings are, and we get it from our mother. She is an excellent public speaker, and she made us comfortable with it with some of the things that we did over the years. But my dad gets very nervous when he has to, but I tried to explain to him this was a simple interview, and you're good at keeping things simple. And he was worried about sounding intelligent. And I explained to him, no, don't worry about doing anything other than you. And that's what he did very well in this interview, in my opinion. Brevity is the soul of wit. That is a quote from William Shakespeare. And my dad really amplifies that quite well. You notice it time and time again. I would ask him a question. And sometimes as an interview, it's difficult when they just give you a simple answer. He's like, that's just a really simple, hardworking mindset. And I think that's also really cool because the simplistic approach is what got him through so many hard times, is no matter what, showing up and doing it. I think that's what I learned from my dad the most in this interview. There were certainly some stories I didn't know about, but is that even though I think on the outside, my dad's a pessimist, anyone who knows him, he can get angry and just really on the outside, really negative. But on the inside, he's the biggest optimist. That's what pushes him forward. He's like, well, no matter what, you got to show up the next day and do the work. And this is what he amplifies and shows as far as his physical actions, but he verbalizes the negativity and the challenge. But that's also what happens when you have a very frustrating job over the year that causes a lot of stress. But it was really cool to hear almost like a calming nature to it, that I now know he always has this internal drive that is, no matter what, we're showing up and we're going to move forward. This is one of my favorite stories about my dad that I got to share because I learned so much from this one moment. Now, I had messed up my car the one day. I basically tried to jump it, plugging it into the wrong thing. I plugged it into the fuse box because it had the emblem that looked like a battery. Turns out that's the emblem for a fuse box, and it blew the fuses in my Trailblazer. So my dad had to replace a bunch of fuses, did all this work, and he did it all without me. And I would have helped him, but he just did it. And I was just like, Dad, well, thank you so much for helping me. Like this, you didn't have to do all this by yourself. Thank you. And he said, well, I just did what had to be done. And I'm not going to lie, the way he said it so simply, I learned so much from that moment. I just did what had to be done. And it's like, I'm certain I've heard people say things like this before and all that, but at this point I was starting to get older, more mature, and starting to learn proper work ethic. And if you just say that sentiment, what has to be done? Like, don't question it. This is the work that you got to do, so go do it. This is why every year in the fall I go out and help my dad harvest. I might only take, it could be 5 days, it could be 10 days. It's usually over the course of 2 to 3 weeks. Harvest is when grain has to come off the ground. And it's very important that you spend minimal time with that grain in this ripened stage. So it's important you go, go, go. And my dad is running from 6 a.m. all the way until 12 p.m., maybe getting 5 hours of sleep. And he does that for weeks. He's up getting all the machinery ready. I only show up in the afternoon when he needs me to operate a vehicle, and he's doing all the background work. And it's something that I do not just to help him, which I'm always honored to be able to help my parents so directly like that. And I do love that piece to it. I do it to remind me what hard work looks like, because I get to be around the guy when it's broken, he's out of the combine, he's fixing it. When, he's tired, he's like, oh, I'm tired, but I'm going to keep going no matter what. Grind, grind, grind. And being around that reminds me, okay, this is hard work, passion, and determination. And I need to see that because I am my own boss and I certainly try to work hard, but I need reminding of how far people can push it. And seeing your dad do it day in and day out when he's twice your age. I still remember some days where I was doing my own job and doing this and was getting tired, but then I'd look outside and I'd see the man that is twice my age getting half my sleep. Like, I'm still getting my exercise and everything. He's just working every day for this time and not showing that he's going to slow down. He might be tired. He shows he's tired, but not showing that he has any margin of slowing down. And that to me is beyond inspiring. Now, I'm willing to bet at some point it's come to your mind, like, why didn't you want to be a farmer? Which I get that question still to this very day. My dad was 0 for 4 for kids taking over the farm. And farming isn't like other jobs where you go to school and then you apply to work for a farm. Like, that doesn't really happen hardly ever. It's usually a lineage thing and you get it handed down from your parents. And sometimes there might be 1 or 2 kids. And in this case, my dad didn't get any. And a lot of people looked like I would maybe be the farmer, especially because I would help every year. But it wasn't something that grit me like it did my dad. Not to mention, when I was younger, there was 2 things that were really working against us. I was an idiot, like full on. I was lazy. I was complacent. I wanted the easy road. I thought it was logical. You spend more time just having fun, and life's mostly about fun. I didn't appreciate that hard work could be fun in essence. I changed over time and I matured over time. If I was who I was in my 20s, as a teenager, it probably would have been a different story. Not to mention, as I mentioned, my dad is outwardly a very negative guy. So me being a very resistant, rebellion teenager, my dad being negative, intense, and angry, we butted heads a lot. So when I should have been getting involved in it, plus I was breaking things constantly. This is another big thing. I once ran into his grain shop, the one that we took that whole episode in, with the box of a truck up. Like, I literally tore 3 trusses into the roof. He luckily, fixed it and everything, but I was known as Dr. Destructo. So with me causing him a ton of stress, me not wanting to be there, it was a real recipe for disaster. Years later, I mature and I start to appreciate the farm, appreciate the hard work. And similar to what my dad says, I look forward to going back. Now, I go back for the easy part during harvest, but at the same time, I saw a whole different appreciation for the farm later on. But when I should have been getting passionate about the farm, that's when fitness entered my life. Fitness entered my life, and it really changed me. It completely changed who I was, not just on the outside, but on the inside. I did start to work hard, learn about hard work and determination through the sport of boxing and committing to fitness. And so as I got so passionate about this, and I appreciate this is what I want to do, I remember the one day I know my dad wanted me to take it over for many years, and it took a while for him to accept that I wouldn't. But after many whiskeys, we had a good heart to heart, and I told him straight up, I know I couldn't do what you wanted me to do, but I'm going to do the shit out of this thing because you gave me the opportunity to do it. And he said, that's all I want. And so with that very honor, I do try to do everything I can in this industry because he gave me the opportunity to do it. So I hope this whole episode for you was something for you to appreciate more on the mindset, more on just hard work and determination and ambition, because that's what my dad amplifies more than anyone I know. And it takes hearing someone's simple mindset of just moving forward sometimes to remind you, if you keep it simple like that, if you just say, we got work to do tomorrow, I got to do what has to be done. It's amazing how it actually can get rid of the negotiation, get rid of the clutter and the noise. Just remind yourself what has to be done. And as always, I want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in and listening to this wonderful story my dad had to share. And if you know anyone who might appreciate a story about a farmer's ambition, please share it with them, because that's how this little podcast spreads, and maybe it can help someone else out. I truly believe that my dad was the perfect person to exemplify what this podcast is all about, because he talked about farming and how it was a way of life. It was just something that he just knew he wanted to wake up and be and do. He knew his form of happiness was chasing this exact ambition. And that fits in perfectly with this whole podcast mantra. So I'll leave you with that. Remember, life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather it's the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.